I am a warrior. I have answered my nation's call. I am an American airman. My mission is to fly, fight, and win. I am faithful to a proud heritage, a tradition of honor, and a legacy of valor. I am an American airman, guardian of freedom and justice, my nation's sword and shield, its sentry and avenger. I defend my country with my life. I am an American airman, wingman, leader, warrior. I will never leave the enemy behind. I will never falter, and I will not fail.
I grew up right in the very corner of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, literally in the corner. We had farmland in Oklahoma, we had cattle and horses in Texas, and our house was in Arkansas, so literally in the corner.
I was born in northern New Mexico in a small town called Cuba, New Mexico, to my parents, Bonifacio and Stella, and there's 5 of us in our family.
I grew up in small town USA, actually Hartsville, Tennessee. My graduating class was about 40, so very small. My mother raised me basically alone, and my brother and sister. But we had a lot of love in our family, so that was all good.
I was born and raised in Chicago in the inner city. My father died when I was 10 months old, so my mother raised 7 children by herself. I have 4 sisters and 2 brothers.
I was born in New York City, Queens, New York, but I actually grew up with my grandparents in the island of the Dominican Republic. It's a Caribbean island. It shares the same island as Haiti. But I lived there for 7 years with my grandparents. They raised me. My mom was a single mom with 3 kids, and it was just easier for her to work and try to finish her school in New York City and support us, send money to support us out in Dominican Republic to my grandparents.
I was born at Fort Rucker, Alabama, Mother Rucker as it's known to those in the Army. I'm an Army brat. I was born on the military installation when my father was going through flight school. I grew up in the Army, with the Army, surrounded by the Army, and that's all we ever knew.
I am an American airman.
I was working hard, I was going to school, and when you're from a small town, there's not a lot of opportunities, and the same thing over and over again. And I just woke up one morning and said, you know, I think I'd like to do something with myself. I don't want to be here 20 years from now doing the same thing over and over again.
I didn't want to join the Army. I knew that, having grown up in it with my father. I didn't want that lifestyle, but I did want to do something in the military, and having visited with the other recruiters and actually a spur-of-the-moment decision, I decided to join the Air Force. My father wasn't real happy about it. He was an Army officer, and when I enlisted and came home and told him about it, he was a little surprised that I decided to go and enlisted. He tried to explain to me, you're going to be poor like you don't know the definition of poor, and you're going to be at the bottom of everyone's food chain, and you're not going to like it. And I didn't care. I'd already done it. This was my decision.
I think from a pretty early age, probably early teens, I already had it in my head that I did not want to grow up and continue to be in the same cycle as the family that I was growing up around. I wanted to leave. And I told my parents that early. So some of the influence was the fact that there was travel involved, and I wanted to get away from Cuba, New Mexico.
My goal was to go away for school. I wanted to move away, be on campus, but that didn't happen, didn't qualify for the financial aid. So I decided that going in the military was the next best thing. I'd be on my own, I could get a free education.
For me, I graduated high school a year early. I was 16 years old when I graduated high school, so I decided to go to college. I went to college for a year and realized that it was too hard on my mom monetarily, So I had to do something different. I had two brothers who had been in the Navy and a sister the year prior who had joined the Army. And so she convinced me to consider the military, but she emphatically said, do not join the Army, go into the Air Force.
Actually, I'm probably one of the unique people. I didn't join the Air Force until I was almost 25 years old. I had graduated school, had gone on to do other things, and was actually the only female electrician in a steel mill in Texas when the steel industry kind of took a nosedive and things weren't looking great. I was definitely still employed, but things weren't looking great. So I had a girlfriend from high school that had joined the Air Force and absolutely loved it. So we just happened to be home at the same time visiting. She was telling me glowing accounts of all the places she had been and the things that she had done. I took a 4-year military leave from the steel mill to come into the Air Force.
I am an American Airman.
When I arrived in Lackland Air Force Base for basic training, it was nerve-wracking. My group was one of the last ones to get in. It was late at night, about 2 o'clock in the morning.
And we got off the bus and it immediately started. The TIs were yelling, you know, pick up your bags, move them over here, what's wrong with you?
I had big hair. It was the 80s. So immediately, that's like a magnet for harassment if you have hair.
My last name was Wright, with a last name of Wright in basic, and everything is right face, left face, whatever. I was terrified most of the time because I didn't know if they were calling me out or getting ready to do a facing movement.
Yelling a lot of instructions at you, and you know, you're hearing probably 20% of them because you're so nervous, but it was an adventure. It was good. A little scary, but good.
It was a very shocking experience, but I knew from that day that this is what I wanted to do.
I am an American Airman.
When I graduated, I actually graduated an honor grad out of technical school. So I got my job. My job was to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma to a combat communications unit. Wow. I was 17 at the time. So I moved to Oklahoma in a combat communications unit. That was the 3rd Combat Comm group. Yes, I was. I was with the 3rd HURT.
I went to Keesler for a year. Was a red rope, which is the highest student level that you can be in charge of other people. I was in charge of the entire 19th Squadron, which is the in-processing squadron for Keesler. So I did that, had wonderful opportunities and, you know, and challenges, and then moved on to Tinker as a computer maintenance technician on AWACS.
My first job was a ground radio technician. I worked on an air traffic control tower system, and out of a 35-person shop, there were 2 women, and one was a staff sergeant, and the other one was me.
Oh, AWACS, awesome. The good and the bad, one of 3 females on the flight line in my particular unit. So I don't know if my prior history through the farming community, through being the only electrician, had kind of set me up for success, but there were only 3 females in my AMU, which is the aircraft maintenance unit. And working on the flight line, still early on in the female arena of doing jobs that are kind of outside of the traditional female roles.
The passenger service side tends to have more females, I think, than the cargo side of it. Of course, there's different physical limitations that are imposed if you're pushing pallets and loading heavy cargo and those types of things. And it's dirty work. You have to crawl up under vehicles that are nasty, and it's hot and it's sweaty, and I guess not a lot of females are interested in that part of the job.
So I was dragging a toolbox, doing maintenance on the computers, on the flight line. Interacted with a lot of interesting attitudes.
Females, we had to work a little harder than the men, and we had to work very hard to be accepted into a male-dominant environment.
I was 5'11" and weighed 126 pounds. And we had radio systems that were, 150 pounds to carry. And I knew that that was going to be tough for me. I mean, I would go home some days from work literally exhausted from pushing mobilizers, hooking up systems to the back of big M35s or 925s, or lifting radios. They call them the two-man lift. I don't know how much I helped, but I did my absolute best, because I knew that in that type of environment, you could not give in to any kind of weakness.
You suck it up. You have to be a team player. You can't be a wimpy girl. You can't bat your eyelashes and let the boys do your job for you, because then you have no credibility. You don't earn any respect.
A lot of the guys, you're in my world, I'm not carrying your toolbox for you. Well, I didn't ask you to carry my toolbox for me. Would you like for me to carry your toolbox for you? Because I definitely can.
I'm an American Airman.
I was an airman. That was my perception. The people that I worked with are for and around female airmen, definitely, because some of the interactions that we had, it was all about, well, you're a female. I never saw myself that way. I just saw myself as another airman.
I remember my water broke when I was climbing a forklift to take a pallet out to one of the aircraft. I wasn't offered a desk job. I was on shortened shifts because I was getting farther into my pregnancy, but there wasn't a desk job offered. That was one of the requests I brought to my supervisor. He was a single male, older. He was in his 30s and I was in my very early 20s, so of course I thought he was ancient. And I was leaking. Probably by about my 6th month, I was already showing the signs of motherhood. And to work the passenger terminal, you had to wear your blues, which these shirts are a little thin. They don't leave much coverage. And I came to him and stringently requested that he take me off the passenger service desk and let me work outside, or at least let me wear my BDUs, because you could see and it's embarrassing. And I wasn't allowed to do that.
We've come a long way from the time where, our supervisors or women would wear their skirt based on how well their supervisor thought their legs looked. That was literally in an AFI at one time. If you could wear your skirt as short as your supervisor thought looked good for you, like for your legs.
I went to Korea for a year, got selected to be the Thunderbird First Sergeant out of Korea, did that for a couple of years. A very, very high conversation piece, if you will. Oh, you're only the second female first sergeant, definitely going out into the masses, across the countries even, talking to the people, being the ambassador in blue, if you will, knowing that it's not just a Thunderbird talking to them, it is a female Thunderbird talking to them. The good of that, young girls across the United States seeing awesome opportunities, the fact that we had the very first female pilot, just really being part of forging the road again, if you will.
I think it's amazing and wonderful that we have the opportunity to be in so many different career fields now, and different leadership positions.
When I look back on Desert Storm, the first Gulf War, 12,500 women were a part of Desert Storm, and I'm sure that number is significantly higher for our recent efforts in OIF, OEF.
It's not been that long since we've been allowed to break into more, strenuous career fields, both mentally strenuous and physically strenuous.
You should care that we've come a long way, that we have female chiefs, and that women have broken through the glass ceiling, if you will, and we can be serve the side by side with our male counterparts and be just as productive. And should we not care? Well, we shouldn't care, because we're all equals.
I am an American Airman.
It wasn't until I actually had to deploy for real with the 3rd in 1991, I deployed to the UAE with one of our systems. And that is when I realized the importance of what we did. I mean, going in, having a system up and ready within hours to do a mission in a war was amazing. It was incredible.
My first deployment was to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, as a translator. So it wasn't even as a dental assistant. I had tested for the language proficiency program prior to that, and then the opportunity came to be deployed as a translator. So I got to go to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to be a translator while they had the Haitians and Cuban refugees. The experience was just great, interacting with the refugees, learning about them and their culture, and just providing a hand, comfort really, while they were in that situation.
I went into Afghanistan last year, right around this time, the late part of September, and that was a huge eye-opener for me. I had not had contact with the wartime environment like the environment that I found at Bagram in Afghanistan. And I was pretty surprised. I mean, I thought, and I think I was prepared because I had deployed, but when I got to Afghanistan, I realized that we were much closer to things that were really happening than I had ever been.
You mean combat?
Combat, yes.
My latest deployment was to Iraq in 2007. When you get in country, just the unknown does make you nervous. Though I was excited to be there, I wanted to be there, it was just the unknown, all the things that you hear that happen, and all the training I just received and they prepare me for. How am I going to use it? Am I going to act the right way? Am I going to do the things the way they taught me?
I think we flew over on a C-130. I'm not sure, but I think it was a 130. And I remember the pilot saying, if you look out, we were flying over the Mediterranean. He said, if you look out, I think he said to your left, you'll see the flares and things like that. I mean, because they were actually at war. You could see the things happening. And so I knew, wow, this is really real. You know, all the deployments out into the field, the practices, the setting up antennas. Now this was really our true test of whether we could do it.
The medical center there is where they bring people to, you know, depending on where they've been injured, to medevac them out. And many of the people that work there at Bagram, whether they're in medical or not, volunteer their time to go over and help with the patients. And so you get to see directly, very directly, the actual impact of people being harmed in a wartime environment.
I was there when we were getting mortar attacks, like 20 a day, over 20 a day. So the first one was pretty alarming for me, but I was in the library trying to email back home to let them know that I made it safely. And it was actually one of Saddam's palace, because I was by the U.S. Embassy there at the time. And I'm trying to send an email out, and all these mortars start coming in, and I'm like, what is this? But everybody else around me is acting normal because they've been there a while and they used to it.
I was only there for 3 months because when we got there, you know, the ground war lasted a minute, and then we were packing up to come back. So luckily for me, I was only there 3 months, but what an experience.
When you're getting ready to leave, it's a very exhausting time because you're preparing for the first couple of days and you're trying to finish your work there and hand off, and then you're trying to prepare all of your out processing, and you're very excited because you're getting ready to come home, but you don't want to go on the edge too much, you know, because people are staying. So you're having excitement, but it's a contained excitement because you don't want to be too over the top with it. But so the day that you leave, you start out very early, and then you go through a long process of hurry and wait. You know, they have to check your bags and get you on the aircraft. But once you're on that aircraft, or you're walking out on the flight line to that aircraft, you start to begin to realize, you know, that it's been a long deployment, and that you're tired and that you're ready to leave there. But you look around the flight line, and for me in Afghanistan, we had stood on that flight line several times for fallen heroes or fallen wounded warriors, putting them on aircraft to go home. And so I looked around, and I felt that presence, and that just thank God that I was going to be able to get on an aircraft to go home. And you get on, and it's quiet again. It's very quiet on the aircraft until the pilot comes on the speaker and says, you know, we've left. You know, you feel the aircraft pull up and you're actually in the air and you're thinking, yay, you know. But tears, actually, you see a lot of tears flowing on that aircraft because people are in a state of, I think, some relief that they're on an aircraft out of there.
I am an American Airman.
Oh, the balancing act. The balancing act of being a mom, being a first sergeant, being a wife, and the demands of the mission. It is a juggling act. And for me, the only way that you can be successful is total open communication with your spouse and with your children.
When I made Senior Master Sergeant and we were at Barksdale, he had an opportunity to become a command chief, but rather than do that, he was also a chief and wearing First Sergeant diamond. He turned his diamond in and we moved to Langley Air Force Base. You know, he went as a chief, but he was one of the first sergeants in this new phase of going to your career field and then bringing back your diamond and going on about life in a different direction.
My husband and I didn't have compatible career fields, so he outranked me and he had an assignment for cross-training into a new career field, and I elected to separate and travel with him. I didn't want to, but I didn't have a choice if I wanted to keep my family together.
And then you made the decision to join the reserves. Talk about that.
I did. I missed it. I missed the camaraderie. I'm a big tomboy. I always have been, and working on the flight line just suited me. I was good at it. I enjoyed it. And here was an opportunity to get back my career and still be a mom and still be able to travel with my spouse who was active duty. And it was a perfect fit for me.
It's very hard, of course, when you have a family and you're on active duty, especially when your spouse is active duty like my husband was. So, but we worked well together to make sure that someone was always there to take care of the children.
I think it's easy to make it work when you both are invested in what you do, but you understand the commitment that the other has.
Yes, it's your career, and you're dedicated, and you're committed, and you're excited. Don't hang up your family along the way. At 20 years, at 30 years, or anywhere in between, you'll hang your uniform up. Don't hang your family up along the way.
I am an American Airman.
I truly came in to do 4 years for the educational opportunities, because as I was working in the steel mill, I was trying to go to school, go to college around shift work, which is absolutely impossible. And my entire goal was to come in, work with computers, get my degree, and move on.
I wanted to come in, you know, the noble thing would be to say, to serve my country, but at that time I was thinking more about what I wanted for my future. And the main reason I came in was to get an education.
But I loved it so much, it was still giving me all of those opportunities and continued to challenge me with new opportunities. There was no reason to leave.
My ideals started to change. It wasn't just for school, you know, it was bigger than that. Now that I understood the military, it was bigger than just going to get a free education.
So 4 years turned into, okay, I'll stay 10, and then after 10 you kind of just commit yourself to the full 20. Certainly never thought 28.
I didn't join the Air Force with any aspirations to become a chief. I thought, wow, if I get to Master Sergeant, that will be incredible, because you just didn't see a whole lot of female senior NCOs.
I was selected for Master Sergeant through the STEP program, and my first sergeant, Dave Day, who I still talk to now, a good mentor of mine, he said, tomorrow when you come in, you're going to be a senior NCO, and people are going to look at you differently, and you're going to feel differently. And I said, oh no, you know, it'll be the same. But it's not true. You go in, staff sergeant was like that too, and you look at your sleeve and you're feeling a lot of pride, and the people are expecting more of you, but showing you a great deal more respect, and you step it up a level.
And then when senior came, of course now, you have to stay. You have to stay till you get the last stripe. Once you hit senior, it's not the end of the game. When you can see that light at the end of the tunnel, you've got to stick it out and see how far you can go.
Did I think that it was realistic? Initially, not necessarily.
I knew that I wanted to be a Chief Master Sergeant. I don't know if I knew what it took.
As senior NCOs, we have a mental checklist. Have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? Because there are written guidance about things you have to do. And then there are unwritten expectations of things that they encourage you to do.
I just said, that's what I want. I want to be a chief. I'm going to work hard. And if I have any say in it, I'm going to make it first time.
I knew the bottom line then was testing, because that's the piece of the puzzle that's always put clearly on your shoulders.
So I worked hard at it. I studied hard, I put my time in, I tried to be the best leader I could be.
My children, ironically enough, my daughter, Crystal, she was so focused on wanting me to be a chief that she quizzed me for months, daily. Every time we were in the car together, she was quizzing me, and I was like, oh honey, please, not again. And she was like, no mom, again.
I didn't find out that I made chief in the same way that an active duty member finds out and holds their breath and waits until the results come out. I knew I was sitting in a chief billet, and I knew that as long as I continued to perform at the standard that's expected of a chief, that I would get a chief stripe out of it eventually.
For me, I tested in October, September, and then the release doesn't come out until November. So you spend 2 months wondering, you're going over it in your head, the questions that you had to answer, how many you got right, looking through the PDG or the PFE at that time to see how many you got right. And then the day that it happens, your commander notifies you.
I was determined not to find out on my own, so I decided to leave my home without checking the computer and decided to drive up to the mountain.
It was my first time testing for Chief Master Sergeant. You don't expect to make it on the first time because, as you know, the top 1% get promoted to chief.
I was sitting at the computer when the list came out, and my husband was standing behind me.
And I remember there were 3 of us in my organization that got promoted to Chief Master Sergeant. And our commander called us all into this room, and he announced the line numbers, and I was amazed.
And as I was driving, my boss, he couldn't wait to get to work, so he checked it from home, and he called me while I was driving up Academy, going south on Academy, heading to the mountain. He called me and said that I was on the list.
So my dad was a chief warrant officer in the Army, and when I called him and told him that, I had a promotion date, I'd been selected to promote to chief, he was so excited for me, and he wouldn't stop calling me chief. And I hated it. I had to tell him finally, Dad, knock it off. He says, I just think it's the coolest thing that we're both chiefs now.
My husband actually saw my name before I did. And he's like, you're there, you're there. And I was like, and this is so emotional. I was like, oh no, really? So, still even today, unbelieving. You do everything. And yet there's still that, what if I'm not? So, a hugely emotional event in my life.
But you've worked so hard for it that you think finally, you've gotten rewarded for all the hard work that you put in.
He flew out and he pinned on my stripes, and while he was standing up there with me, he's holding these enormous chevrons because they're pretty big on a little person. And he had big tears in his eyes, and he says, you know what, baby girl? This might be cooler than being an officer. I'm so proud of you.
I'm an American Airman.
My family is so much bigger than it was because all of us, we say day to day, the Air Force is truly a family. The military is truly a family, and it is.
That's the foundation of who we are. The last line says, I will never leave an airman behind. And that's what we do. We're airmen first, and we take care of each other.
I always hear how we compare with the rest of our sister services, specifically the Army, the Marines.
You know, the Air Force has not always gotten the right kind of credit for the role that we do play in protecting our country in a war.
If you go and ask an Army person what they are, they'll tell you they're a soldier. If you ask someone in the Marines, they'll say they're a Marine. You ask an Air Force member what they are, they'll say I'm security forces, or they'll say, you know, I'm a ground radio technician. And I challenge each and every one of them to say, I'm an airman.
Why shouldn't we be proud of what we do and who we are? And we should, and that's what the Airman's Creed's all about.
It's the guiding principles of who we are.
I am an American airman.
My career, I would like to say, has been a saving grace for me in my lifetime.
I love my Air Force career. In fact, I would stay. If they'd let me stay, I would stay forever, you know, as long as I could, as long as I could be a productive member, taking care of the people. It's all about the people. It really is all about the people. So if I think I've done one thing right, I think I've done that.
I absolutely love the Air Force. I absolutely love the fact that it has given me opportunities that I would not have had anywhere else, and that I truly want to encourage all young Americans, not just male, not just female, not just Hispanic or African American or whatever. It doesn't matter. The military, my Air Force, because of course I love the Air Force, but the military gives you opportunities you're not going to have anywhere else.
It's been a great ride. It's been an incredible experience. I've got to go to amazing places, meet amazing people, and have the opportunity to do amazing things that I may never have had in a civilian life.
I don't think I can ever completely be away from the Air Force. I think I will always be, in some way, trying to be in there, trying to take care of the airmen, and I just can't see ever being away. I love it.